Build a star out of the chakra lattice, a smooth basin where the emergent light speed dips, and nothing else. Point a telescope past its limb and starlight bends. The rays swing inward exactly as they would past a real sun by something close to half an arcsecond. The lens works. Now drop a stone at the surface of that star. Nothing happens. The stone hangs where you left it. Nothing falls, nothing orbits, and a clock at the center of the basin keeps perfect step with a clock at infinity. That is the case file for this chapter. The same geometry that bends the light will not so much as tug a pebble. Under Newtonian intuition, those two facts cannot both be true. Anything that bends light must surely pull matter. In the chakra substrate, both are true exactly, and the reason is not a subtlety of the approximation. It has a name and it comes with a bill. One thing before we begin. Advaita Chakra Theory is a speculative, exploratory framework, not established, peer-reviewed physics. Much of what follows is honest conjecture that still needs validation. Watch it in that spirit as ideas to test, argue with, and refute. Chapters 3 and 5 built the emergent metric out of one object, the locked goldstone of the substrate, whose gapless branch travels at the emergent speed. C squared equals A squared J over I, the lattice spacing squared, times the stiffness divided by the inertia. Let the stiffness vary from place to place, and the speed varies with it. Long wavelength modes then write an optical metric minus dt squared, plus 1 over c effective squared, times dx squared. Written out as a matrix, the time entry is -1, and the 3 space entries are 1 over c effective squared. All of that is honest analog geometry. It is Gordon's optical metric, 100 years old, and Chapter 6 computed its exact curvature. The trap is in a single entry. Every bit of variation the substrate has to offer sits in the spatial block. The time entry, the one physicists call the lapse, is frozen at -1, and nothing you do to the stiffness moves it. A metric shaped like that has a name. It is ultrastatic, and this chapter is the unpacking of that one adjective. Freeze the lapse and you have made a decision about force, whether you meant to or not. The acceleration of a slowly moving test body is carried by exactly one Christoffel symbol, capital gamma, upper I, lower 0. For any static metric, that symbol equals -1/2 times g inverse ij times the gradient of g00. Read what that says. The force is a gradient of the time entry. Nothing else appears in it, no stiffness, no spatial curvature. Now substitute the ultrastatic value. G00 is -1, a constant, so its gradient vanishes and the whole symbol collapses. A particle instantaneously at rest has a geodesic equation that reduces to precisely that symbol, so its acceleration is 0, not small. Not first order in something. 0. This one is genuinely derived, no approximation, no tuning, nothing but the constancy of the lapse. It is entry R005 in the honesty ledger of the book. A body released from rest in a chakra star stays exactly where you released it. The metric that bends starlight cannot drop a stone. The same fact reappears one derivative up, and one derivative up is where sources live. Take a general static metric with lapse n, so g00 is -n squared. Then the time-Ricci component is n times the spatial Laplacian of n. Every single term carries at least one derivative of the lapse. So the spatial geometry may curve as violently as it likes. R00 does not hear it. It hears only the lapse. For the chakra metric, the lapse is identically 1, and therefore R00 is 0. Now read that against Einstein's time equation, which sets R00 proportional to the energy density. With R00 pinned at 0, that equation does not relate energy to curvature, it forbids the relation. The positive conserved energy density built in Chapter 6 has nothing left to couple to. Matter cannot gravitate on this metric. It can only lens. And the clocks agree proper time equals coordinate time identically, so there is no gravitational redshift, none, between the bottom of the deepest well and infinity. Wait, redshift, the Newtonian potential itself, everything general relativity keeps in G00 is simply absent. The obvious escape is to push harder. Crank the stiffness into a deeper, sharper well, and surely a force falls out. It does not. Any variation of the emergent speed enters the metric only as a conformal factor on the spatial slice, an overall rescaling. The goldstone that rides that metric is conformally coupled, and it carries no scale of its own. The locking Hessian has an exact null vector, which is precisely the statement that this mode has no gap and no intrinsic frequency. A mode with no clock cannot register an absolute potential. It registers only ratios, gradients of the logarithm of the speed, and those gradients are exactly the content of the spatial curvature and of the lensing. Look at the two curves. Take C effective equal to C0 times e to the phi of x and plot both curvatures. The spatial curvature R swings hard and changes sign. R0 sits flat at 0 for every profile phi. It is the same masslessness that made light massless in chapter 3. A mode with no gap forbids weight. The tax is forced, not chosen. Put numbers on it. Model a star as a spherical dip in the emergent speed, central fractional depth delta naught. Calibrate to the real sun by matching the would-be Newtonian potential at the surface gm over rc squared, about 2 times 10 to the minus 6. So delta naught of 2 parts in a million over a radius of 700 million meters. Starlight grazing the limb picks up a deflection of order delta naught, about 2 microradians, 4/10 of an arcsecond, the kind of bend actually seen at the solar limb. The spatial metric does real work. Now release a stone at that surface. Its acceleration is exactly 0, independent of delta naught. No fall, no orbit, no Kepler ellipse. And now the sharpest number in the chapter. In full general relativity, the deflection is the sum of 2 equal pieces, one spatial curvature, one time, which is where the famous factor of 2 comes from. The ultrastatic metric supplies only the spatial piece, so even the lensing it delivers is short by a factor of 2, and the missing half is precisely what the frozen lapse withholds. So pay it. To get force, redshift, a horizon, you must put dynamics into the lapse by hand. Write 0, 0 as -1 plus 2 phi. Then R0 equals the Laplacian of phi, and Einstein's time equation comes alive as Poisson's equation. Laplacian of phi equals 4 pi effective times rho, with a genuine force and a genuine redshift. That arrow is the boundary of honesty in this theory. Everything to its left is derived optical geometry. The arrow itself is an insertion. At the level of this chapter, the potential phi is posited, not produced, asserted, and tagged as such. Sakharov's induction, next chapter, dresses the inserted lapse with an Einstein-Hilbert action and fixes its coefficient, but it presumes a dynamical lapse already exists to integrate over. It does not promote it. The promotion is earned later in chapter 10 from the one sector the geometry papers never varied the inertia and locking sector, whose gapped clock frequency ω0 does break the conformal gauge. There the potential is derived, phi equals delta log ω0. So R0 equals 0 was a frame choice, not a law. The verdict. The chakra substrate hands you a magnificent lens and a complete failure as a source of weight, not a flaw in the approximation, but a theorem about the sector we looked in. Derive no force, no source, no redshift on any stiffness profile whatsoever. Standard the optical metric, the lensing, the factor of 2 decomposition, textbook physics, relabeled. Asserted, the promoted lapse, which this chapter posits and does not produce. What is not claimed is that this theory has general relativity. Chapter 12 returns the verdict that the promoted lapse is a massive Nordstrom-type dilaton riding a broken Lorentz scalar tensor gravity, and the very lattice spacing that lets gravity emerge is what keeps it from being Einstein's. That spacing leaves a twin fingerprint, a Lorentz violation scale, ELV equals h bar c over A0, and part 7 goes hunting for it. Read part 3 as one long argument with a frozen G00. It opens next chapter with the oldest idea in the file, that gravity is not fundamental at all, but induced one loop at a time, out of the vacuum itself. Chapter 8, Sakharov-induced gravity, a word of acknowledgement. This work was inspired in part by the non-dual teachings of Sri Narayana Guru, that the creator, the creation, and the substance of creation are fundamentally one. Symbols from the Hindu tradition, the Sudarshan chakra and the Shiva linga, suggested the analogies behind the chakra model. They are acknowledged as philosophical and symbolic inspiration. The physics stands on its own. Thank you for watching. If this made you think, the book and the next chapter are linked below. Until then, one substance and how far it reaches.